Oak Island team have just found the mysterious hatch.
Want it to be is the entrance to a tunnel, and there was some evidence of that.
Buried beneath Oak Island's surface, a shocking discovery has just come to light. A hidden hatch that could finally explain what happened 200 years ago. For decades, treasure hunters have risked everything searching for answers, but none have come this close. Everyone is holding their breath, waiting to see what lies beneath. Could this be the key to the island's greatest question? Or is it just another dead end in a long line of heartbreaks? Tune in, because what the Ladinas uncover next will rewrite human history forever. The hunt for what lies beneath the island. The treasure hunting crew's excitement was off the charts when they stumbled upon this strange hatch. A rusty door to who knows what. Was this finally it? Could it be hiding the treasure they have all been desperate to find? Or, considering all the ominous warnings about curses and doom, could this be a one-way ticket to disaster? You'd think after a decade of being let down by false starts, these treasure hunters might be a bit more skeptical. But no, each new find, even a hatch, seems to spark the same wild hopes all over again. It's like they can't help but dream that maybe, just maybe, they're on the verge of solving the island's biggest question. But what they didn't realize is that this hatch might lead to something far more dangerous than treasure. Something that's been buried for a reason, and what lies beyond will change everything. Their latest discovery traces back to some old, dusty map. This wasn't your everyday map, no. It seemed to hint at something hidden beneath the island's surface. And so, there they were, scrambling to get to this hatch, hoping it was the back door to the money pit, or maybe a hidden vault where unimaginable treasures were waiting. It's all very exciting if you ignore the huge chance that they could be walking into some kind of death trap. But in true Oak Island fashion, fear of doom is just part of the fun, right? After all, this isn't their first dance with danger. They've faced similar situations, and let's be real, they probably will again. This treasure hunting path has already seen its fair share of setbacks, but the Ladinas aren't giving up. Not now. They called in their history expert, Zena Halpern, to help them make sense of the old maps. And boy, did she deliver. Zena pulled out not one, but two ancient maps, revealing a hidden code etched into them. The excitement among the crew was palpable. One of these maps was dated 1179, drawn in Roman numerals no less, showing Oak Island nestled between latitudes 46 and 47. Just imagine, this place was on the map, literally, way before anyone thought. But that wasn't all. There was also this curious dot labeled Rodon near the island. Zena believed it referred to New Ross, a settlement supposedly linked to Henry Sinclair's old-timey expedition in 1398, a possible link to Sinclair and maybe even the Knights Templar. Now that's enough to make any history buff's heart race. If there's one thing we've learned from watching the Ladinas over the years, it's that they never let a possible lead go. Fueled by Zena's new information, they decided it was time to dive in head first. They held a meeting, brought in Doug Crowell, and with Zena sharing her expertise, they set out to uncover what things this ancient map might reveal. The maps were full of tantalizing clues, and the team had that old glint in their eyes again, hopeful that maybe they were close to the legendary 229-year-old treasure. And then came the Templar theory, which has been hanging around since the beginning of this entire adventure. Ever since Daniel McGinnis and his friends started digging in 1795, people have been coming up with all sorts of wild ideas. Maybe it's pirate treasure from the 1600s, or Marie Antoinette's stash from the French Revolution. Some folks even think it might be tied to William Shakespeare's lost manuscripts. But the theory about the Knights Templar always comes back around, and the Ladinas seem to think they've got new proof of that connection. They found an old map with what seemed like clues pointing to a Templar presence on Oak Island centuries before anyone thought possible. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder, could there actually be a treasure buried here by the Templars themselves? The next big clue came etched into Zena's maps. One map depicted all of Nova Scotia, which was pretty cool by itself, but it was the French map from 1347 that truly raised eyebrows. Words in French, surely that means something, right? Maybe the French were here before anyone else. Who knows? The fact that these maps featured words like anchor and valve only made things even weirder. No one really knows what these words mean in this context, but one thing was clear. They just added to the island's ever-growing list of questions. The Ladinas and their crew knew one thing. Whatever they were dealing with, they weren't backing down. Standing near the old hatch, the team knew this was about more than treasure. It was about finding something buried deep in the past. Tracing old maps to find the next clue. The crew's morale was surprisingly high, even if they were struggling to make sense of everything. It wasn't just about finding treasure anymore. It was about solving the problem of Oak Island. And the deeper they dug, the more they realized that whatever things the island held were most likely underground. The treasure might have to wait, but the quest to understand the island's history was just as captivating for them. That's why their attention kept turning back to the Knights Templar. Could they have built a castle or a fort on Oak Island long before Prince Henry Sinclair ever showed up? Could that fort still be there, hidden beneath layers of dirt and time? To get to the bottom of this, the team set out to find the strange hatch. They believed that comparing the old maps with current satellite images might finally give them some answers. If they could find a match, a specific landmark that lined up, it could lead them straight to the hatch. Rick was a bit skeptical, though. Zena's findings were fascinating, but he wanted more proof. The team had to make sure they weren't being led on a wild goose chase. With Oak Island's long history of misleading treasure hunters, they couldn't afford to make any mistakes now. But despite any doubts, the crew knew they had to keep going. They moved their search near Dave Blankenship's house, comparing Zena's old maps to new satellite images. It was a tense moment, but things started to fall into place. The old maps seemed to line up perfectly with the island's current shape, borders, and features. But then came the real kicker, a bright spot on the map. Was this the hatch? The Lagainas couldn't believe it. After years of searching, they might have finally found something substantial. If they could get to that hatch, who knows what they'd find on the other side. But it wouldn't be Oak Island if there weren't obstacles, right? The team quickly realized that they had no idea what this hatch even looked like. Was it a metal door? A stone slab? They had no clue. They were about to have to get really creative. Jack Begley, always the hopeful optimist, noticed that the bright spot on both the old map and the satellite image represented a hole. A literal hole. Could this hole be where the hatch was hidden all along? It was enough to make even the most skeptical among them feel a thrill of excitement. Rick and Marty had a heated discussion about their latest find. Both were eager, but had different ideas about what this meant for them. They couldn't ignore the possibility that the hatch could be a link to some of the island's wildest treasure theories, whether it was pirates, writers, or ancient knights. But no matter who originally buried the treasure, there was one thing that was clear. The Lagainas were determined to find out what lay hidden beneath the island's surface. Maybe, just maybe, Zena's maps would be the key that unlocked everything they had been searching for. So the hunt for Oak Island's questions continues. With each step forward, the Lagainas and their team find themselves deeper in a labyrinth of clues, traps, and unexpected discoveries. They've faced challenges they never imagined, and every small victory just pulls them in deeper. It's the thrill of the chase that keeps them going. The thought that maybe with the next clue, they'll finally be able to unearth the truth. It's a never-ending path that's pushed them to the brink, both physically and mentally. But as long as there's another hint to follow, they're not about to give up. The team, having discovered a lead, knew that the path ahead would not be an easy one. They braced themselves for the challenges that lay ahead, as there was no guarantee that the hatch would yield the answers they were seeking. Nevertheless, hope was something the Lagaina brothers carried with them, and it kept them driven. They decided to investigate the surrounding area more thoroughly. After all, they couldn't afford to overlook anything, especially at this stage of their search. The map showed a bright spot in the area of interest, but they still didn't know exactly where to start digging. The crew set up their equipment and began the laborious process of excavating the site. This wasn't just about moving dirt. It was about uncovering history, unearthing clues, and pushing the boundaries of what they understood about the island. With every shovelful, they hoped to get one step closer to revealing something that might finally make all of these years worth the struggle. Uncovering the hatch was exciting, but what waited beneath the surface was even more important. Steps into darkness beneath the island. As they continued to dig, each hour felt like a day. Time seemed to slow down under the hot sun, and the work was grueling. Yet, in their minds, the team members could almost see themselves lifting treasure out of the pit. Chests filled with gold and priceless relics, glittering in the sunlight. That vision was what kept them going when their muscles were sore and their spirits began to falter. But it wasn't just about material wealth. For them, the treasure was also a chance to be part of history, to be the ones who finally cracked the problem that had evaded so many before them. Days turned into weeks as the excavation site expanded. At times, progress felt stagnant. They found plenty of small, curious artifacts, pieces of pottery, old metal tools, and even fragments that might have been part of some structure. All were fascinating in their own right, each holding a story from the past, but none were the answer they were seeking. Even when exhaustion crept in, the team pressed on. They were determined to uncover the truth, whatever it took. In the midst of their digging, the team decided to broaden their approach. They brought in ground-penetrating radar to help identify any unusual voids or structures beneath the surface that might indicate where the hatch lay. It was a calculated risk. Every time they brought in new technology, it cost more money, but this wasn't a moment for holding back. The radar picked up something interesting, a hollow area, not too far from where they had been digging. Was this what they were looking for? They had to find out. Excavation at the new site began, and the team was on high alert. Every shovelful of earth was scrutinized, every small stone examined carefully. And then, they hit something. It wasn't the usual resistance they felt when shoveling soil or rock. No, this felt different, like they had struck something artificial. The digging grew more careful, and with each scrape of the spade, a shape began to emerge. Slowly but surely, the outline of what looked like a flat, rectangular surface started to become visible. The team worked with meticulous precision, brushing away the dirt until at last they could see it clearly. There it was, the hatch. It was covered in dirt and rust, clearly ancient, and it looked like it hadn't been touched for centuries. The team gathered around, staring at it in awe. After all these years of searching, they had finally found a hidden door beneath the island. It was a surreal moment filled with both hope and fear. They had no idea what lay beyond that door. Was it a treasure, or was it another dead end? Was it safe to open, or could it be hiding some kind of trap, just waiting for an unsuspecting hand to trigger it? They decided to proceed cautiously. Marty, ever the pragmatist, insisted they inspect it thoroughly before attempting to open it. He didn't want anyone getting hurt, not when they were this close. They brought in a metal detector, hoping to get a sense of what might be on the other side. The readings were unclear, but there was definitely something there. The tension was palpable as the crew prepared to open the hatch. It was a delicate operation. No one wanted to risk damaging what might be behind it, and more importantly, no one wanted to put themselves in danger. The hatch was heavy, and it took the combined strength of several team members to even begin to lift it. As they strained against the weight, the air seemed to grow thick with anticipation. Slowly, inch by inch, the hatch began to give way, creaking loudly as it moved. And then, with one final heave, they managed to lift it open. What they saw beneath left them momentarily speechless. A dark void lay beneath the hatch, a yawning black hole that seemed to swallow the light. It took a moment for their eyes to adjust, but soon they could make out a set of stone steps leading down. The steps looked old, worn smooth by time, and covered in moss and grime. The air that wafted up from the opening was cool and damp, carrying with it the scent of earth and decay. The team exchanged glances, a mix of excitement and trepidation written on their faces. They had found something, but what exactly had they uncovered? Flashlights in hand, they prepared to descend. One by one, they carefully made their way down the stone steps, the beams of their lights cutting through the darkness. The descent was slow, each step taken with caution. The stone steps were slippery, and the last thing anyone wanted was to lose their footing. The deeper they went, the more the walls seemed to close in around them, and the air grew colder still. The space under the hatch opened into old tunnels, and what they found inside changed how they saw the island forever. The hidden corridor beneath the hatch. At the bottom of the steps, they found themselves in a narrow corridor. The walls were made of rough-hewn stone, and the ceiling was low enough that they had to duck slightly to avoid hitting their heads. The passageway stretched ahead of them, disappearing into the darkness. There was no telling how far it went or what they would find at the other end, but they had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The corridor seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning as it led them deeper beneath the island. The air was thick with moisture, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the passage. The floor was uneven, and they had to watch their step to avoid tripping over loose stones. The further they went, the more the sense of anticipation grew. They were heading into the unknown, and with every step, they were leaving the safety of the familiar behind. Finally, the corridor opened up into a larger chamber. The room was spacious, with a high ceiling that arched above them. The walls were covered in strange markings, symbols that none of them recognized. It was clear that this place was old, very old. The atmosphere was heavy with history, and the team couldn't help but feel a sense of reverence as they looked around. They had stumbled upon something truly remarkable, something that had been hidden away for centuries, waiting to be discovered. In the center of the chamber was a large stone table, and on it lay several objects. They were covered in dust and cobwebs, but it was clear that they were not just random debris. The team moved closer, their flashlights illuminating the table. There were old scrolls, their edges frayed and yellowed with age. There were also several small chests, each one intricately carved with symbols that matched those on the walls. The sight of the chests made their hearts race. Could this be it? Had they finally found the treasure they had been searching for? Carefully, they opened one of the chests. Inside, they found coins, old gold coins that gleamed in the light of their flashlights. The excitement was electric. This was it, proof that there was something of value hidden on Oak Island. They had finally found a piece of the treasure. It wasn't the massive hoard they had dreamed of, but it was something, and it was enough to keep their hopes alive. But there was more to the chamber than just the table and its contents. At the far end of the room, there was another doorway, this one sealed with a heavy stone slab. It was clear that whatever lay beyond that door was meant to be kept hidden. The team knew they couldn't leave without finding out what was on the other side. They had come too far to turn back now. It took all of their strength to move the stone slab, but eventually they managed to shift it enough to slip through. Beyond the doorway was another chamber, smaller than the first but no less intriguing. The walls were lined with shelves, and on those shelves were dozens of small, intricately carved boxes. Each box was different, and each one seemed to tell its own story. The team could hardly believe what they were seeing. This was a treasure trove of historical artifacts, each one more fascinating than the last. As they examined the boxes, they began to realize that this was no ordinary treasure. This was a collection. Someone had gone to great lengths to gather these items and keep them hidden away. Who had done this and why? The questions were endless and the answers were nowhere in sight. But one thing was certain. This discovery was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. It was a glimpse into a past that had long been forgotten, a story that had yet to be told. The team spent hours in the chambers, documenting everything they found. They knew they had only scratched the surface of what lay beneath Oak Island. There were still so many questions to answer, so many questions to unravel. But for now, they had something tangible, proof that their efforts had not been in vain. They had found treasure, but more importantly, they had found history. As they made their way back up to the surface, the team couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They had faced countless challenges, endured countless setbacks, but they had never given up. And now they had something to show for it. The hatch had led them to something incredible, something that would change everything they thought they knew about Oak Island. But the path was far from over. There were still more clues to follow, more things to uncover. The island had given up one of its treasures, but there was no doubt in their minds that there was more waiting to be found. The search for Oak Island's things would continue, and the Lagainas and their team were more determined than ever to see it through to the end. Could the hidden hatch on Oak Island finally prove the treasure is real? Or is it another hoax meant to mislead us all? Share your thoughts and remember to like and subscribe for more.